This morning, as I was preparing for this morning, and the title is Complaints, Conflict and Church and Councils of the Church Knowing What to Do When the Rubber Hits the Road, I actually prepared a presentation on conflict management. Okay. And it's here. But I'm going to start with part 2 because I'm very afraid that we're not going to get to part 2 if I don't start there. Okay, so you have to forgive me, because it's much more fun to start with conflict management than it is to start with managing complaints, but that's what we're going to do. So I'll take a little pause in a few minutes and skip through about 20, 30 slides and pick them up in the middle, if that's all right, if you'll forgive me for that. The little cartoon is probably not a surprise to you. Anyone had that experience in a church council? You're all gathered around and you think, what are we going to do about this? I hope this will show. I don't know. Can you read that? I think the first item on the agenda will be to unload our weapons. Familiar? Or what about this one? I guess my first question is, do you ever press charges? Or, hey, I wouldn't want to confront Mrs. Schultz either. Or, Pastor, we've finally decided how we're going to reconcile our issues with the church. Ever heard of Judge Judy? You're right. Talking through the problem brought us to an agreement. It was all your fault. Welcome to the church. Would you care to join a coup against the current pastor? Oh dear. I don't have time for this, Stan. We'll talk about it at the business meeting. Sad, but true. Now, this is where you're going to have to see what we might have done, if we might get back to it. Here we come. Okay, managing complaints. When we talk about complaints, it's really a general term for all sorts of troubles that beset us. So they might be incidents, sort of the things that where we have to look into something and work out what's the right pathway forward. And it's usually about people, of course. So just want to talk briefly about a framework for dealing with complaints. And in any complaint strategy, in any organisation, perhaps a bit of a stretch, but you'll have these 4 stages. Receiving a complaint or the report of an incident. So there's the receiving of it. It's separate from the rest. It's the first stage of hearing about it and responding to the person who's complaining. That's a first and separate stage. The second stage is the assessment, investigation or exploration of that complaint. And that's usually the biggest and most troublesome part of dealing with a complaint. And then the third part is, well, when we've decided what's going on here and what we're going to do about it, how do we actually put that into place? How do we actually communicate about a complaint, and what are the ramifications of what we think we're going to do about it? Okay? And the fourth stage, which we must never forget, and sometimes we do, is the stage of healing and recovery. So, to start with then, a little puzzle for you. Jack comes to you after worship and says, Mary's treating people really badly. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's always been a bit mean. She just shouted at me to get out of the kitchen. I saw Jenny in tears last week, and she was rude to some newcomers too. It's no wonder they haven't come back. You're going to have to do something about her. familiar? Anyone ever had anything like that? So what I want you to do is to talk to your neighbour, and I guess they're people that you've come with, so that's fine. Firstly, is this a grizzle or a complaint? And how would you know? How would you decide whether it's just a grizzle or whether it's a complaint? How would you work out whether it's important to listen or not? And what if the complainant wants to remain anonymous and or does not want to put it in writing? Okay, what are you going to do? All right. So, neighbours, threes, might want to turn around so that you talk to somebody other than your partner or the person who brought you. So turn around if you need to, but just 5 minutes to talk about what you are going to do about Jack and Mary. So I'm just going to run through some general principles about that first stage of the 4, receiving a complaint. First thing to do, thank you, Valerie and somebody else who said, listen. Okay, whatever's going on, you've got an upset Jack. Even if there's no basis to what he's saying, you've got an upset Jack. People are unhappy, need to feel they've been heard. I've written a lot on these slides so that you've got a lot to take away with you, okay? And when I look at the handouts, the newest versions of PowerPoint make everything so tiny. And so you probably needed to bring a magnifying glass with you today, I'm sorry. Okay, everyone needs to be taken seriously. And good listening will give you the clues you need. Listening is a really good investment of your time, even if you're sick of listening to Jack. Even if you're sick of listening to Jack. And if Jack has said these sorts of things for the last 20 weeks, then you need to have shared with your council the issue around Jack, that he's a very unhappy chap, and you need to have a pastoral strategy in place for Jack. We do need people who are prepared to listen and listen and listen and listen and have the time to do that. And sometimes the chair of church council is not the person. Okay? It may not be that person's gift for a start, and secondly, they may have lots of other things that they're trying to do on Sunday morning. So think about your listening strategy. If there's no one around and you're not busy, it's you. Okay? The second lot of things we need to do is to evaluate, and we've been doing some of that in our conversation. Is this a church council issue? Or is it just that Jack hates Mary? It happens, okay? Is it about the well-being of the community of faith? And what we need to remember is we need to say to Jack, have you talked to Mary about this? Have you actually said to Mary, Mary, I was really sad to see Jenny upset last week, and she tells me such and such. So you model for Jack the way that he can have a conversation with Mary. With Mary. Jenny. Okay. It's terrible when you make up names, isn't it? Here we go, Matthew 18. And it's at the heart of all conflict resolution inside and outside the church. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the faults when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. So, too often we say, tell me all about it. We don't say, have you talked to that person about it? Okay, it takes courage, but we need to be modelling the Christian way, telling truth. Okay, so then we get to, so it was listen, evaluate and clarify. Deciding whether a complaint is formal or not is crucial to your process. Anonymous complaint, it doesn't exist. Put it in the bin. If you start responding to anonymous complaints, you'll do nothing else. Ask the person, what do you want me to do about this? Okay, so you're telling me, Jack, what do you want me to do? Often people do just want you to know and don't want you to do anything. What do you do with that? What do you do with that?
I think that can be valid to a point, and that they're asking you to maybe just keep your eyes and ears open and get your impression as to what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other reactions to that?
There may have been other complaints beforehand. It's not only Jack who's complaining.
That's right. Well, it may be. That's exactly right.
You're obliged to do something about it.
Okay. In general, this is the most common situation. People just want to offload. And you've probably done them a favour by letting them talk about it. And as leaders in a community, we hold a lot of information that we don't necessarily do anything about. We just know our people. As Davis McCackey says, pastoral oversight is knowing our people and loving them. Knowing and loving them. And this is something about knowing them. There needs to be a whole lot of suspended judgment here, and I'd be cautious when somebody says that to you, that you don't offer an opinion back. All you are is the sponge for this stuff, okay? So as soon as you have a position about it, you have already taken sides. And you might think, I haven't taken sides, but the person perceives that you have. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But there's a lot of stuff in communities where people tell us stuff, and that's just what leadership is about. It's about knowing. It's about knowing stuff and knowing some of the rubbish around our communities.
Having listened to Jack, you might say with him and having listened well, what do you think you might be able to do if this happens again?
Yes, exactly. And what might you model there, Alison? What might you say to him if he says, I have no idea what I could do next time?
Well, to model back to him to say that about his feelings about it.
Yes, that's right.
Which is not attacking her, it's just simply saying what...
No, so modelling some assertion, some assertiveness skills about saying, when you spoke to me like that and chucked me out of the kitchen, that made me feel terrible. I felt that you didn't understand why I was there, and it wasn't a good look from the servery. Okay, can we talk about that? You know, that sort of stuff. Now, what if they say? But if they say, yes, I want to make this a complaint. This is a complaint, but I'm not going to be the one who complains. In other words, I'm not going to write anything down, and I'm certainly not going to sign anything. Okay. So in that case, you're not obliged to do anything. You're not obliged to move forward with the complaint at that time if the person is not prepared to put themselves on the line about that complaint. Now, you're right. This what was her name? Mary. Mary might be a serial offender, and you might have five of these conversations. You do need to do something about it, don't you? And that's because of your role of oversight and your care for the community. So you're not obliged to do anything if somebody won't sign it. But I think you need to have known how many people have complained. You need to have kept a record of when things happened, so that you don't go to Mary and say, I need to talk with you because 15 people have said things about you. What? Who are they? What are the things that they've said? If you say, well, I don't know. It's just been what it's been like for the last 6 months. Like that's not okay. All right? So you need, if you're going to hold on to that information with the thought that at some time you'll tip over into having to do something about it, you need to know and have remembered very accurately what the stories have been. There's another thing to say about that, and that is don't leave if you're going to do that, if you think that that's what this issue is about, don't leave it too long. Don't go to someone with a list of sins from the last 18 months. How awful would that be for someone to confront you about your behaviour with a record of your wrongs for a long period of time? So there's a whole lot of wisdom and judgment that you need to bring to bear on something like this. So caution is your best friend. If the complaint is informal, never, ever, ever, ever make promises that you will sort it out. I'll fix that for you. Okay? Don't do it. The reason is you may not be able to sort it out. And what you do is you become triangled. Now, what on earth does that mean? Triangulation is really hard to explain, all right? So I'm going to have a try. We've got your person A up the top, happy chappy, and you're in relationship with two people, and those two people are in conflict. And what they will try and do is each of them try and draw you closer to them. We used to have, I wish I still had it, in my sewing box, I used to have a ruler that folded up, and so it was very easy to show you with one of those what happens when you try to bring one corner closer to another corner. Because what it does is it deliberately makes the triangle taller, so that there's more distance between one of the people in bringing two closer together at the base. Does that make sense? Oh, I said it was hard to explain. And so that's what people try to do. They try to bring you close, confide in you, so that you're their best friend. And what happens to us is that often we get pulled into that centre place by both parties. They both talk to us, don't they? And we're very kind, pastoral, supportive people to both of them. And what we do when we come into this place here is we make it safe for each of them, because they're negotiating with each other or having a relationship with each other through us. Okay, so we're the safety buffer. You know, that person will sort it out for me. That person, the church council chair will sort that out, or my pastoral person will sort that out, and they'll be there in the middle. What happens is, in that safety, and after time, a relationship's repaired. But each of them knows that they've confided their worst, innermost feelings with you. And now there's a conflict because you're aware of the complexity of the relationship, and they want to put it behind them. Okay, and so what happens is everything is your fault. When they're best friends again, it's all your fault about what happened back then or that it wasn't resolved. So being triangled is a really dangerous place to be, because suddenly you get blamed for everything and you're given the responsibility for a conflict that is not your own. So that's why I say never say you'll fix things, because it puts you right there, right in the middle of that sort of conflict. Okay, do I need to have another go? Is that clear enough for you? Yep, okay. So let's look at a very simple way of looking at this. You have a conversation. It is a pastoral conversation, always. And the pink one is if it's obviously not anonymous, it's a conversation, but you might get the occasional anonymous letter about situations. If it becomes formal, encourage face-to-face, a la Matthew 18, document and be watchful. If it's formal, pay careful attention to your procedures. So by formal, I mean something written down, something specified about what the complaint is about, and it's signed. So let's go back to informal complaints. Exceptions, when you don't just let it be, hold it in your hands. You need to report immediately to the Presbytery Synod if there's a sexual misconduct allegation involved. Anything to do with sexual misconduct, please get on the phone to us and seek our advice. If it's with a minor, report it on the abuse hotline immediately and then report it to the Presbytery Synod. And if you haven't done that, by the time you get to us, we will help you do that. But that is our child safe environment requirement. We mustn't ever evaluate, think about, I'm sure that person didn't do that. That can't be possible. That person is the life and soul of this community, couldn't possibly have abused a child. It's not up to you to evaluate. You get on the phone and you report it to the abuse hotline, and then you tell us, because then what we will do is follow through with the Families SA and the police as to what the status of that complaint is over the next little while. And what we will tell you if this person is in leadership, to stand them down from leadership immediately. Okay. Now, that sounds harsh and it's something none of us ever want to have to do, but it's a strategy to protect the person, the respondent to the complaint too, to actually take them out of a situation where they can be accused further. Okay. So it's about protecting our community. But it's also about protecting the person. Yes.
So will you have told the complainant that this is what you're about to do?
In very shortly, yes. Not before you ring the abuse hotline. No, absolutely not. No, I just do it. And then there are going to be pastoral conversations, and you and your minister, and if you don't have one, us, will come with you to tell the respondent what the accusation is. They need to know before the police are knocking on their door. Although we don't have to. We're not obliged to tell them, but it's a pastoral matter to do that. Okay. We'll come back to sexual misconduct in a moment later on.
What sort of documentation should you keep in this matter?
Everything. Write down everything. Right. It doesn't matter how messy it is. And when we talk with you, we'll ask you for particular details. But with the ones that we've had I said, he said, she said type documentation. But you clearly need to have an idea about what the nature of the allegation is, because that will determine what you stand a person down from, for what reason. So there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of working things through when something like this happens. But the thing you might miss is, it must be on a different slide, where this applies also to if you find out about past criminal history in the sexual area. We need to know, if you know, as soon as you know or someone in your community knows about a history, we need to know. And the reason is that we are not covered by insurance as officers of the church, we are not covered if we know about something and then under our watch somebody reoffends. It's in black and white in our insurance policy. Our insurers will not insure us. And guess what, folks? It could be seen as personal liability. Thankfully, our standing committee just recently has decided to underwrite and guarantee the officers of the church should something like this happen. So you have a pedophile in your congregation, and somebody finds out that they're on the sex offenders register, and they don't tell us, we don't know, and perhaps you don't know as church counsellors. But then along comes the person reoffends under our roof with our children, and that family has every right to sue us. We have no insurance. Okay. Sorry to labour that point, but it's really important that we get caught up in our pastoral priorities and think that it's loving somebody to keep their secrets. As leaders of the church, we have to be responsible and keep a very firm eye on the safety of our whole community.
Sharonne, I was just wondering if there is a convicted pedophile who comes to your congregation, I mean, what do you do? I mean, are you saying they can't be there?
No, I'll come to that.
Okay.
I'll come to that later. No, it's a matter of dispute, isn't it, Malcolm, on standing and Tony on standing committee about what we do about that. What we have in the long tradition of churches and in accordance with best practices across the Christian community, we have ways to work with that so that person can worship with us and feel safe and loved in our communities. So, where am I up to? Exceptions with informal complaints. If there are criminal matters, you need to make the decision whether to report to the police immediately, and that depends on the severity of the issue. And is it your responsibility to report this to the police or somebody else's? Is this gossip or hearsay? You know, all of those issues you have to think through, and then you need to tell us that this has happened in your community. I'm sorry this is so sombre. All your faces have been, you know, we've started this way and we went, so I'm sorry, but that's why we're gathered to talk about it. You need to keep an eye on possible legal, reputation or insurance risk to the church. That's what being on a church council means. It's one of the implications. So right at the top of the list of the roles of the church council is the spiritual oversight of a congregation, and down the list you'll see all the sorts of responsibilities that we have, and some of these are right there embedded in what it means to be a church counsellor. And if a matter is related to worker health and safety, it's wise to report it immediately to the Presbytery Synod office. Now, there are things we'd rather get told about things that we don't need to be told about than to not be told about things that we should be. For instance, a young woman died within 48 hours of being at one of our church camps, and there was a dietary component in the cause of her death. Now, it wasn't reported to us for some time until the penny dropped, hang on, we could be in trouble here. And so then it was reported back through our worker health and safety. It was not our fault. Her death had nothing to do with the camp. But the government, Safe Work, really had a good look at us, had a really good look at our procedures, had a really good look at our record keeping, and they were generous and let us off the hook over some of the gaps in that. But I tell you, if she had died because of something to do with the food at the camp, we would have been in trouble because our procedures were not adequate. We had a generous Safe Work person who said, I can see from the coroner's report this has got nothing to do with you. Just fix all that stuff up, will you? Okay? So there are serious things. But you are not alone. I think that's my last slide. You are not alone in this. We are in this together, to quote someone that I work closely with. Nigel Rogers, our Gen 6, always saying we're in this together. So we're in this together, and that's what we're here for. Okay. Oh, there it is. It's there. You don't need to worry your way through these matters on your own. We've seen it all before, and we'd rather be over-informed than kept in the dark. So that was informal. Okay, let's get to formal stuff. A complainant is very often upset. Put pastoral care in place. You'd think that that's obvious, wouldn't you? But time and time again, we don't think about it. We don't actually formally appoint someone to have the responsibility of caring for this person while the rest of us are reminding ourselves to keep calm and carry on. Okay? So you need to think about that and appoint someone to do that. People need reassurance that their complaint is taken seriously, that we're willing to hear what they have to say without judging them. So your posture when you are receiving a complaint is complete openness. Be careful how you make apologies, but I wouldn't ever stop anyone from saying, I'm sorry that this has happened for you, or I'm sorry that you've experienced something like this. Okay? So it's really important for a complainant to know that they are trusted and they're believed. Now there's a problem, isn't it? Do you believe it? Okay, so we'll get to the fine points about that. But it's really important that the church is receptive when people complain about us. A complainant may need help to formulate and document their complaint. And that's because in some sorts of complaints, people are really traumatised. The matters are very personal, and some of our folk aren't as literate as they might need to be. And there are traps in writing a complaint around defamation and all sorts of things. So a person writing a complaint needs to have a bit of an eye on what the implications of what is written down are. And the person with that wisdom is likely to be you, okay? Or it might be us. So there's the list of the things that can go wrong. If you assist with the documentation, and a good complaint is well documented. The complaint, if your complaint document is well written and clear, the process for the complaint is much more streamlined, much simpler. So there are good reasons for someone to help someone to write their complaint, but you must ensure that the complainant makes the document their very own and not yours. So it's always, this is my best effort to help you. Here it is. You do what you want with it. Change anything. This is not written in stone, but I've just tried to put down what you've told me in a way that the investigation team will be able to look at it. Okay? So, for those reasons, the person who receives the complaint should never be involved in investigating it. Because if you've done a really good job of receiving the complaint, you cannot be objective. You cannot be perceived to be objective because you have spent so much time understanding this person who has come to you, and you'll be seen as having taken sides. Now, I'm giving you the most formal strategies, but it's really important to get the principles the same. Even if you think, well, we've never had anything that drastic to have to deal with, it may be round the corner, folks. I'm sorry, we never know. So it's the first and most important thing. The person who receives the complaint should never be a person who investigates the complaint. So if you're on church council and you're receiving the complaint, it won't be you who goes to ask the questions, to find the witnesses, to suss it out, okay? So then we come to the second stage, which is exploring and investigating the complaint. Determine carefully who will do this, usually 2 or more people. Ensure no conflicts of interest, and that's really hard in a small congregation, which is why sometimes you come to us. And we'll provide the people who will do the sussing things out. A congregation at the moment where somebody very well known has been accused of rubbing up against women inappropriately in the congregation. Well, that's not an easy thing for any member of that congregation to investigate and to ask personal things about. That's definitely, I mean, it's in the sexual misconduct area anyway, so that's definitely something that you ring up and you say, Sharonne, Malcolm, Nigel, Beth, Wendy, what do I do here? Okay, but this is important with even the little annoying things, like somebody accusing an elder of behaving inappropriately in a pastoral visit. Okay, so that might be something that you can work through locally. You probably need to do a bit of investigating before you discover whether it's a sexual matter or not. But you can find people, I would hope, that you can trust to be objective. It's always helpful, I think, in small communities to check out with both respondent and complainant if they are happy with the people who are going to look at it. Check it out. Otherwise, you're doomed from the beginning. If they don't trust the process and they know the people and don't trust them, you need to inform the respondent. Put in place pastoral care immediately. It's a very lonely place. It's a very lonely place when you've had a complaint made against you. And it's really hard to rely on spouse or family to be that support. It's hard on them, and it's hard on you, and it's hard on family relationships. So put pastoral care in place immediately. The respondent must have a copy of the complaint so that they know what they're accused of and so that they can respond to the complaint. Offer a support person for any interview process, not necessarily the pastoral care person, but somebody who comes along to listen, to interpret, not to be involved, but to go and debrief with the person afterwards. Consider timing issues. Don't leave someone with a complaint hanging over their head for weeks or even days while we get organised. So the thing is to get organised and be ready, and so that within 24 hours, if possible, after somebody knows about a complaint, they know that the process is rolling. There's only so many nights you can have nightmares about what somebody has complained about. Okay. Determine the process you'll use, how many conversations. Be aware that every time you talk with a complainant, you may be re-traumatising them. That is a very bad thing to do. Seems a bit obvious, doesn't it? But we don't think about it. We say, we just need to go back and find out what she meant by that. Or what really happened. We need more information. Every time you do that, you re-traumatise your complainant. And so it's important. That's why a complaint document is really helpful, because it gets on paper enough, if it's well done, for whoever's investigating not to have to do that, for it to stand alone. Do you need witnesses? Ask both complainant and respondent whom they would like you to talk with, especially if it's a matter of reputation or whatever. People have a right to say, I want you to talk to so-and-so, because they'll tell you about me, okay, or whatever. But ensure you talk with equal numbers on each side of the issue, all right? We're just talking about due process, natural justice. for someone, deal with the matter in a timely manner, and then, joy of joys, you write a report for the church council. Okay? And usually a report for the Presbytery Synod too, but we're just talking about church council. Any questions about that? It sounds really formal, doesn't it? It's terrifying when I put all this stuff up on the board, but it's much easier to tell you the best way through some of this when you don't think it's ever going to happen to you, than for us to make really simple, easy mistakes. I've made every mistake in the book, I have to say. You learn the hard way. Okay. Anything anyone wants to ask?
Sharonne, when you tease out .3, do you need witnesses?
Yeah. Well, it depends. That's why it's a question, really, on what the complaint is about. I think when I don't know that I actually read it, but I think on one of the slides I said what behaviour is observable. So the complaint needs to be specific enough for you to know whether somebody is likely to have seen what happened, and because that will be a factor in how you evaluate it. So you need to see if anyone knows whether anyone saw this happen, and then talk with them as part of the process.
Well, one of the things you haven't mentioned, and I was involved in the workforce, anytime complaints were made to us, or we wrote any, and we wrote it down, we always dated and signed everything that we wrote down, even if we weren't going to use it, in case it blew up later down the track and we had to have proof. So everything had to be dated and signed. And
that's absolutely right. It's best if you do. Yes, it gets very messy if nobody knows what day it happened on or whatever. You're
or even when you receive the complaint.
That's right. It's documentation is really quite important. The trouble is, when it starts out with Jack complaining about Mary, it doesn't feel like something you need to document, does it? That's just Jack being Jack. And then by next Sunday you realise this is not just about Jack being Jack, this is something much more serious. So sometimes we have to document in arrears. That's okay, the sooner you do it the better. You say, I think it was 2 weeks ago that Jack came to me and said. Honesty, we're not all perfect, we're not robots, we don't have time for anything like me. It's home for lunch and get lunch on the table, all that stuff at church. Put it out of my mind, I've got a life to live here. We're human, okay, and we don't always know how serious things are until they blow up a bit more. Okay, so the Church Council considers pastoral strategies for the whole community involved in this dispute, incident, complaint. Oh, I don't know what that grammar's about. Oh, the Church Council questions and resolves who needs to know. Now, this is a really tricky question because some things the people do need to know about, especially if there's someone that is before the courts on sexual abuse charges, and where that person has had contact with the children of the church. And you will need to work out very carefully how, when and where you tell people. And you'll need to know what the bail conditions of somebody are, because if their name has been suppressed, you have to be really, really careful about how you spread the word that Joe Bloggs is the person that was in the paper about a sexual abuse situation. So that's why you need some assistance, and why we have to put some boundaries around who we tell and how, but we still have to keep our community safe. It's Very complicated. So, may put in place a behavioural covenant. I'm going to race now. May suggest restorative justice. Okay, so there might be something that the respondent needs to do in order to put things right. May decide that resolution of this matter is not possible and may refer on. Okay, that's okay, folks, to say we can't work this out. It's got to go to presbytery. They'll have to help us. And may consider disciplinary responses, and you can look at the regs around the privileges of membership. You can withdraw the privileges of membership, and you can step people down from leadership. Okay, they're the things that are in a church council's power. They may want to request that the respondent be excluded from worship or the premises for a limited time. We are really reluctant to do this, and please don't do it on your own. We have had church councils who've done this, and we've ended up in court. Or no, we haven't actually, but there was the potential that we were threatened with legal action because of it on several occasions, in several situations actually. So don't exclude someone from worship without talking to us. So we mustn't. We need to protect ourselves being accused of discriminating with people because they might have a mental illness, might have a disability. You know, all of them might be about race. We can be accused of lots of things, so we need to be really careful if we're going to do this, but we do it. Not often, but we do. So all of those things we think about and we help, and actually usually I'm the bunny, I go to talk to your congregation with a letter from the presbytery to say, this is what's happened in your congregation. And it's been the considered decision of the church council that this is what we need to do. You don't need to name the person, and that's often a really helpful thing not to do. But it's all something that we work through. Okay. A church council might decide that this complaint is vexatious. It happens often. Okay, so then we come to outcomes. Outcomes communicated to both the respondent, the complainant, pastoral care offered, pastoral care, pastoral care, pastoral care, pastoral care. And we may often offer to pay for some help from a clinical psychologist or from another sort of counsellor. And we must remember to diarise. And then we come to healing and restoration. A church council and the ministry team may give close attention to what may bring healing. Opportunities for prayer, service of lament perhaps, a ritual within worship around brokenness, forgiveness and reconciliation. Of course, these are the sorts of complaints that affect the whole community. There will be lots of complaints that make no impact on the community at all. So you're not going to have a public service of lament about Jack and Mary's dispute, are you? So, some common sense here. But take care to get the timing of these actions right. Actually, with Jack and Mary, it's the sort of situation where a minister might invite them to have communion together. So there are things that can be done. But anyway, because a premature invitation to resolution can do much damage, or an invitation for people to forgive, or an imperative to forgive too early without the work being done is a really damaging thing to do. Okay, I'll finish quickly. Matters of sexual misconduct, I think we've sort of covered it really. I think I've talked about, I'm obviously very concerned about that. I've said all those things already. So what will the Presbytery Synod do? Keep you in the driver's seat. The Church Council is central to what's going on in a community. Presbytery Synod's not going to do anything that we're not doing in partnership with you. Has the person been charged? Is the alleged offence connected with church activities? What impact will this have on your church community? Who needs to be informed? All issues that we talk about when you give us a call. What are the conditions of bail? Has the name been suppressed? How do we keep your church community safe and the person of concern too? Should the church support this person in court? Should someone even attend court And you'll find that there are many ministers who believe that their pastoral care should extend to going to court. And we ask our ministers to think very seriously about that. Some notorious situations could highlight, sorry to be so defensive, but highlight the role of the church in a situation. It may be best to find other ways to support this person. It's very difficult. And we all have, if somebody's accused of a sexual crime, we all have an immediate reaction according to our history and our experience. And so some of us are going to be very angry with somebody who's accused of a sexual crime, and some of us are going to be very supportive of the poor person they've been persecuted. Okay, so this is going to be alive in your congregation, both of those responses, and they happen to us as leaders too. So I'll leave you to read that. Will this divide your congregation? And usually it does. How can we handle that? And is there a need to inform the parents of children? So please keep us informed. And we begin immediate work on a behavioural covenant. I decided not to bring a sample with me today, but a behavioural covenant is a document where, let me see, here it is, next slide. It reminds us all that the UCA promises to be a safe place, that's right up the top, offers care and support for the person of concern, and makes clear the expectations of that person. So we put strict boundaries around what that person is able to do and not able to do. The reason that we take people out of leadership is that leadership implies respect, power, influence, and the person, it's assumed that that person is a role model if they're in leadership in the church. And sometimes it feels really cruel. I tell you, it does feel really cruel when you say to somebody, you can't do what you love doing anymore. But Peter Barnett, who is our consultant in these things, says it's a bit like going through a minefield. If you've got your legs blown off, you've got your legs blown off. And whilst we can do all sorts of things with in recovery, you're still going to have no legs. And that's the sort of situation we're dealing with, sadly. Let us know if it's about your minister and it's potentially serious. And if you don't know what to do, talk confidentially with your region minister. And if you don't know who your region minister is, I've got the maps here so that you can look it up, so that you know which of those. I don't know why I've got N Beth Seaman there, Beth. It should be C Beth Seaman. But so talk with those folk. Their phone numbers are on these cards here. They are your first port of call. And they will be getting to know your congregation, and they will be supportive and helpful. So what do we do to avoid all this? All those things that everyone complains about. Everyone complains about doing these things, but they're essential. Doing the compliance things, keeping our eyes and ears open in love, having a passion for the well-being of every single person in our care, a determination to hear the voice of the child. How do you hear the voices of children in your congregation? A commitment to following compliance requests of the Presbytery Synod. So that brings me to the end of all of that. Let me say that when we do have these situations, I'm blown away by the maturity of the leadership of our church. Our ministers have been absolutely, unbelievably wise in the way that they have cared for their congregations, the way that they've cared for people who are accused of all sorts of things, the way that they've cared for the families of those people. It has implications in so many layers. And if you have something like this, it will distract your minister and they won't get a lot of all the other things that you think they should be doing done. I'm sorry to say that, and we wish it didn't happen, but it's a bottomless pit of a people's time. So whilst we might think when these things happen, they're in the wrong book. This doesn't belong in the church. We don't want to have to deal with it. It's in the wrong book. It's actually where our theology of grace and truth really comes to a fine point, where the rubber does hit the road about who we are as a community. How do we find room for the wounded, the broken? What does it mean for a person who is rejected by community to find a place of safety and support in Christian community? And how do we, whilst we're doing that, still speak the truth and still protect our community? This is the challenge of leadership, and I thank you for taking it on. I'd encourage you to make sure your minister goes to the minister session in September. There'll be a new relaunch of the Called to Care program in the weeks ahead, and you'll all get hard copies of policies and our Called to Care handout document. The policies don't change so often, but the Called to Care booklet is constantly changing. So right across it'll say, look at the website please, to get the most up-to-date things. But if you've got something in paper in your hands, you've got a bit of an idea about a starting point. So you'll hear a lot about some of this stuff over the months ahead. What I pray is that you'll be able to give it due attention, but there'll be so much joy in your church council about everything else, about the life of our Christian community together. So thank you, God bless you. And I hope you haven't gone to sleep, but I hope you've got your notes so that should you get a call at midnight, you'll have a starting point.